Defense News. It's proudly sponsored by Navy Federal Credit Union. If you're a member of our nation's armed forces, the Department of Defense, or if your family is, we'd be proud to serve you too.
On this episode of Defense News Weekly, a conversation with the Executive Director of Veterans of Foreign Wars of the United States, one of the largest veteran service organizations in the nation. Amid a time of rapid change and new directives in the VA, Pentagon, and White House, the head of the VFW talks about what it means for vets and lays out initiatives he's working on to improve benefits for those who've served. Coming to you from Washington, D.C., it's the latest in news and analysis, from the Pentagon to the platoon, here on Defense News Weekly.
Welcome back to Defense News Weekly. I'm Leo Shane, Capitol Hill Bureau Chief for Military Times, coming to you today from our studio in Washington, D.C. Today we're here to talk with one of the biggest veterans groups in the nation about the issues they're working on as advocates for America's 17 million veterans. Everything from medical care to veterans homelessness to suicide prevention. These are the topics they grapple with every day. Joining me is Ryan Gallucci, Executive Director for the Veterans of Foreign Wars. Thank you for being here.
Thanks, Leo.
So you guys have your big annual convention coming up in just a couple of days here. You're going to be out in Columbus, Ohio, where the organization was founded. What's the big focus? What's the big topic this year?
Well, we have a lot going on out in Columbus. So as you mentioned, the VFW was founded in Columbus in 1899. So we're actually closing out our 125th anniversary celebration at our 126th National Convention and really passing the torch on to a new generation of leadership. So our current Commander-in-Chief, Al Liphart, is likely the last Vietnam veteran to hold that position. And Carol Whitmore, an Iraq veteran, a fellow Iraq veteran from the state of Iowa, is slated to be elected as our first woman Commander-in-Chief. Now, we're going to be talking about a lot of things. In addition to our elections of new officers, our members and delegates deliberate on resolutions that really guide the work that we do here in Washington, D.C. And we have a lot of issues that we're talking about. I mean, things like alternative treatments for post-traumatic stress disorder, the persistent issue of toxic exposure, access to quality care, the transition from military to civilian life, and modernization of VA's veterans programs and services.
I know these are all issues that you and I have talked a lot about, and I know the members who are going to be out there talk a lot about these things, but do you get a sense of where America is on these veterans issues? How much do folks really follow? How much do folks understand? Because I know we've talked about some of the disconnect before.
Yes, and that's become common as we work in veterans advocacy. So the United States has had an all-volunteer force since 1973, so more than 50 years of an all-volunteer force. And while the public perception of the military remains high, the challenges that the military-connected population is far smaller today than it was at the end of the Vietnam War. For those who are connected to the military, many of those issues are front and center. But to the American public, maybe not so much. You know, frankly, there's veterans policy, though, embedded in a lot of public policy.
Right. And I know that's something that we've talked about and tried to work on there. So how do you push that forward a little bit further? Again, I know the convention is a chance for you to be in a major city, be talking about some of these things, but how do you push out to the public and say, these are things you need to care about too? This is not just our one little corner that only affects us.
Well, the way that we do it is, first of all, trying to engage in any medium that we can. And again, really appreciate the opportunity to share it with your viewers who are maybe a little bit of a different niche, focusing on defense instead of veterans affairs, where we many times our issues are pigeonholed. But really educating how veterans are assets to their communities after service on things like accessing higher education or entrepreneurship, and even accessing healthcare. VA's research has led to countless innovations within American healthcare generally, and it's something that we want to see continue, and that many Americans should want to see continue. So having a strong and vibrant veterans healthcare system and making sure that veterans have access to education and quality careers and entrepreneurship opportunities after service affects every American.
Wanted to talk to you. You mentioned the first female commander of the VFW. You mentioned the first Iraq War veteran to lead the VFW. You yourself are an Iraq War veteran. I think a lot of folks still have the perception of VFW and the veterans groups as the Vietnam era, the Korean War, the older guys, the back room. Talk about the changing face, because I know that this has been an issue in recent years, as we've seen the number of folks come back from Iraq and Afghanistan looking for not a wholesale change in what VFW it is, but a different set of priorities and a different set of issues to add to the advocacy work you're already doing.
So interestingly, the perception of veterans can change over time. And the VFW, we're a 125-year-old organization. The transition that the VFW is going through today is one that's happened traditionally after other conflicts. Carol will actually be our second Iraq veteran to serve as commander-in-chief, and actually
I already blew it here.
Fourth post 9/11 era veteran to serve in that position. Right now, many of our executive leaders are. Most of them are OIF, OEF veterans, Operation Iraqi Freedom, Operation Enduring Freedom, and our Adjutant General, basically our CEO, he's a Desert Storm veteran as well. There was a training conference that we host out in Annapolis for our accredited service officers, and we had a guest from VA who was asking about the generations represented in the room, and it was fascinating to see that change has already come. Many of our leaders are Iraq and Afghanistan era veterans, and keep in mind, those conflicts, Afghanistan started in 2001.
Sure, yeah.
That was 24 years ago. I got back from Iraq in 2004 and have been in advocacy just about ever since.
Well, and I think that's one of the things too, especially when I talk to folks outside of the veterans community and outside of the defense community, there's still the thought of the young veterans being very young, right? Like you're talking,
Yes,
you must
yeah.
be talking about veterans who are 27, 20. These are folks who now have not only come back, but have raised a family, have integrated. When I'm looking at the unemployment reports for veterans and the employment reports, that is all the post 9/11 veterans now, the Desert Storm era and stuff. They're still a percentage of it, but we're talking about this generation. So for an organization like yours that does date back, that is looking at this, I know you've been through it, but how do you keep relevant? How do you keep on top of that?
Well, the way that we do it is by listening to our members and empowering our members to be agents of change within the organization. We talked about our national convention coming up, and one of the things that I find exciting is anytime we go to national convention, there is deliberation and debate on resolutions, and resolutions can come from departments, our state entities, we call them departments. They're generated by members. Some of the things that we're advocating for, we have a standing resolution on offering paths to citizenship for deported veterans. That started organically out of the Dom Diego VFW post in San Diego, California, because VFW members were advocating for veterans who were facing deportation in Southern California, going over the border to Tijuana to provide those services, and that came up organically through the organization. There are others where we partner with organizations that are like-minded. We have a new relationship with Grunt Style and the Grunt Style Foundation, where we hosted a summit on veteran harm reduction. And their leadership identified an issue that we've had a resolution on for a few years, on psychiatric medication and making sure that we're pushing for informed written consent, responsible alternative therapies, and pushing for VA to serve as a to establish centers of excellence to research those different modalities for veterans who are suffering from invisible wounds.
All right, well, I got a couple more questions for you about congressional stuff, but we're going to take a quick break first. When we come back, we'll shift into some of the topics VFW has been tackling on Capitol Hill in recent months and what comes next in that work. Welcome back to Defense News Weekly, where we're talking with Veterans of Foreign Wars Executive Director Ryan Gallucci. Ryan, we talked a little bit before the break about some of the stuff facing Congress and the new administration here. The big story has been the concerns over cutting the staffing at VA. I know VFW has been involved in this. Initially, we thought there may be as many as 80,000 folks who got cut from the VA payrolls. We've heard in recent weeks that now looks like they're going to settle around that 30,000 number. I know VFW came out and applauded some of the work so far, at least some of the transparency, but where do things stand and what are you hearing from veterans about the concerns with just what is happening with the VA workforce?
So when the first round of cuts happened back in February, I believe it was, our national commander was pretty outspoken about what was happening. There were VFW members who came forward who were working some frontline positions and they were erroneously let go. What our commander, Al Lippert, said at the time is recommended using a scalpel instead of a chainsaw. Shortly after, VA brought many of those employees back. They're still working today. And then that's when about the 80,000 figure started to circulate around Washington, D.C., and a lot of people were, 80,000, they're going to cut 80,000 jobs. There was chatter, but frankly, we didn't really latch on to the speculation. We were pretty clear with our members, like, hey, don't get, if you see something, please say something, but don't get caught up in speculation. That's a target, that's a goal. And the Secretary said the same thing when he testified before both the House and the Senate, that this was a goal. That, look, the president was elected on a platform of he's going to come in and shrink the size of the federal government, shrink the size of the federal workforce. What our responsibility was to give them, first of all, the time and space to develop a plan, but also to make sure that the Secretary lived up to his commitment, that it wouldn't affect direct services to veterans, family members, caregivers, and that care and benefits would still be accessible. Look, we all know that there are places where bureaucracy can be fixed. And frankly, every president that's come in since I've been in Washington, D.C. has sought to do that, even at VA. When the Obama administration came in, it was the same thing, that his chief of staff, Rahm Emanuel, convened the VSOs to try to do the same thing and scale back Department of Veterans Affairs. Our goal is to make sure that any administration will do it responsibly. And so when they announced that their workforce reduction was going to be closer to 30,000 and that it would be accomplished through normal attrition, the buyouts through the fork in the road and other mechanisms like that without a large-scale RIF, that was something that we applauded. Our national commander, again, Al Lippert, put out a statement applauding the Secretary for approaching that directive from the President deliberately. Again, it was something the President campaigned on, but something that we had the responsibility to make sure was done correctly and that veterans received what they had earned.
So let me ask you, because we've been doing this long enough that I know how behind the scenes works a lot of the time. You'll hear from the administration, there'll be some communication between the veterans groups and the administration. It doesn't mean the administration is asking your permission, but there is usually a value in what the veterans groups have to say and the impact this is going to have on the communities, the fears, the concerns, the challenges, and all of that. What's the status of communication right now with the veterans groups and this new administration? Because I've heard very mixed bag so far.
Well, I think from the VFW perspective, we've had really good communication over the last couple of months. As more of the team has come into place and as more of the Secretary's vision is moving forward, we've had a lot more collaborative communication and then support as well. So we're looking forward to the Secretary joining us for a national convention, but it's not just that the Secretary will be there. We're once again supporting a VA benefit claims clinic with the help of the VA regional office. We host a health fair every year where veterans can explore the programs and services that VA makes available to them. They're supporting that as well. We have regular communication with VA on a variety of topics. They solicit our feedback. We provide them unsolicited feedback, as we've always done since 1899, or since the Veterans Bureau was commissioned. But and that's look, I think the communication is going in the right direction. And there are things where we see the Secretary executing on things that we've wanted to see done for a long time. We applauded the Secretary and the Deputy Secretary for speeding up the deployment of the electronic health record. But also, there are other places where we think that there will be alignment moving forward. They're working aggressively to address the VA claims workload, make sure the benefits are delivered in a more timely manner, deploy better technology. Those are things that we've asked for years. I mean, there's some technology programs that we use as advocates that have been in sustainment since 2012. It's time to fix those.
I know you guys aren't shy about talking to members of Congress, too, about things that you want to hear. You guys been advocating for the Richard Starr Act and several other pieces of legislation. Talk to me about where you feel Congress stands right now. I know there's some bipartisan impetus towards these things. There's bipartisan agreement on a lot of veterans issues, but there's also a ton of gridlock. And I don't know what your level of optimism or pessimism is right now in terms of actually getting some significant veterans legislation done in the next few months if they're caught up on a potential shutdown, they're caught up on the budget, they're caught up on reconciliation fallout. I mean, can veterans issues be a place where there's really is some bipartisan breakthrough? Well,
thankfully, we just had some. It may be small, but just a couple of weeks ago, H.R. 1815, the VA Home Loan Program Reform Act, passed the House and the Senate through unanimous consent and was hotlined through the Senate. So no partisan objection to that whatsoever. So I think that there are places where there can be consensus. That bill in particular was introduced by a VFW member and chairman of the Economic Opportunity Subcommittee, Derek Van Orden. And it was to really address some of the concerns that the Republicans had about the VASP program. Now, Secretary Collins chose to sunset it. It was only in place for about a year, and even that was a stopgap to address the sunset of the foreclosure moratorium. See, these things build on each other almost ridiculously. It's layered.
There was still a fair amount of fighting over this, though, and whether or not that program was ended too early, and even though the final issue was compromised. So I guess, do you see that as a positive breakthrough because we did come from a fair amount of partisan fighting to a solution, or is this how things are going to go? There's going to be a lot of fighting before we get to any result from now on.
I don't know. So I mean, you've seen the hearings, especially on the House side. They can become contentious with some of the commentary from the dais back and forth from the members of the committee. But I think that the Home Loan Program Reform Act gave me a lot of hope that that compromise is achievable, and that we can move forward in the best interest of veterans. There are a couple of other bills that cleared the House markup just last week. Many of them were Republican-led, but a couple of the Democratic initiatives made it through as well, and will go now to the full House for consideration. So we still see bipartisanship, which is reassuring. And we see collaboration to make sure that they can get things done.
Stay right there for a second. Time for one more break. When we come back, our financial expert will walk you through tactics for mending your credit score. Later, we'll be back with more from Ryan on what to expect for veterans issues this year.
Welcome back. On this edition of Money Minute, Jeanette Mack from Navy Federal Credit Union returns to give you actionable steps you can take to mend your credit score if it needs a little help.
It's no secret, a good credit score helps make it easier to buy or rent a home or finance a major purchase in your life. So if your credit score isn't up to par when it's time to get loans, cars, or homes, you're costing yourself money. To get debt under control, you can request a rate reduction from your lender or transfer higher rate credit card debt to another lower rate card. A balance transfer or debt consolidation can simplify your life and put some breathing room in your budget. Whatever you do, don't close a credit card just to pay it off. This can actually lower your credit score. The best ways to raise your credit score is to pay bills and loans on time, every time. Stay within your credit limit and borrow or charge only what you can afford to pay back. You can also stay on top of it by checking your credit report regularly with all 3 credit bureaus. You get 1 free credit report annually, so stay on top of it. Maybe go a step further and get with a credit counselor. Having a debt management plan can help you reduce your credit card interest rates, consolidate your debt, and pay off debt faster. It's never too late to start managing your debt better. It literally pays in the long run.
To get more coverage of military and defense topics, float your personal recon dirigible over militarytimes.com and defensenews.com for more headlines. And to be the most up-to-date drill sergeant screaming at the recruits, sign up for our early bird brief, compiled each morning bringing you the most recent headlines. And if social media is how you stay up to date, follow us on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and X. And we're on TikTok, so go follow us there as well. When we come back, the conclusion of our conversation with the executive director of the VFW. Don't go away.
Welcome back to Defense News Weekly, where we're talking with Ryan Gallucci from the VFW. Ryan, talk to me about what the other congressional priorities are going to be for the rest of this year. What are you guys going to be when Congress comes back into town? You guys will be working all through August, but when they come back into town, what are you going to be beating them up about?
Well, when they come back in town, we come back in town in force, and the VFW has a national legislative committee with representatives from every state. It's about 100 people who come to Washington, D.C. to advocate with their legislators. They'll be coming in early September, right when Congress comes back. Okay. So we'll be pushing for reforms like the Access Act on community care, but also bipartisan initiatives that we think can get done. Like we talked a little bit before about Congressman Bergman and Correa's Innovative Therapies Centers of Excellence Act, our TAP Promotion Act, which is about access to accredited claims representation. That's in the baseline of the National Defense Authorization Act. And then, of course, the Major Richard Starr Act, concurrent receipt for combat wounded veterans, combat wounded retirees, which has bipartisan support to go in as an amendment for the NDAA. But there's another one that we've really started to talk about. So we're the veterans of foreign wars. What makes us unique is you have to have served overseas in a conflict. And so we regularly visit service members who are stationed overseas and those who support them. Since last fall, we visited places like Germany, Italy, Korea, and heard about challenges with accessing healthcare. Some of it with the active duty force that needs to be resolved through TRICARE overseas and some cultural differences in care delivery. But then also, we really want to focus on VA's programs for civilians who live overseas, or for civilian veterans who live overseas. So that's a lot. But basically, if you are a veteran stateside, you're entitled to the full suite of VA care and benefits. If you're overseas, it's something called the Foreign Medical Program. And really all it covers is reimbursement for conditions that are service-connected. Now, the veteran who's overseas is responsible for then finding a doctor on their own, receiving the care, paying for the care up front, then filing for reimbursement through VA, hopefully. Now, there isn't much structure to it, but what we've heard, first of all, most veterans who are living overseas are working to support U.S. interests, largely through the military, but also through the State Department. We presented it 2 years ago that this is a potential national security risk. We caught the attention of a congressman out of New Jersey, Jeff Van Drew, and last Congress he introduced the Foreign Medical Program Modernization Act. This Congress he reintroduced it as H.R. 467, which would provide some structure to the program, similar to VA's other community care programs, but also make sure that veterans are receiving coordinated care, even if they're overseas supporting American interests. Now, the reason this is important, we're not just pushing for that act. We'd also like the committees to host a hearing on overseas veterans. There are a lot of veterans who...
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because that really is a group that doesn't have a voice, so, that doesn't have a congressman necessarily to rely on. So for VFW, this seems like a group that kind of have to be out there for.
Exactly. I mean, that's who we see that we are, and that's who we seek to speak for. A lot of issues in Congress, if there's an issue at, say, right here at Fort Belvoir in Virginia, the congressional delegation for the state of Virginia is going to receive a critical mass of inquiries from all of their constituents who are stationed on Fort Belvoir, work on Fort Belvoir. But when you're overseas in Yokosuka, Japan, or Camp Humphreys, or Wiesbaden, Stuttgart, Vicenza, when you're at your congressman or your senator, they may get 1 or 2 inquiries. And every congressman or senator may get 1 or 2 inquiries. There's never that critical mass where a member of Congress would say, hey, this is a problem here, we have to address it.
Listen, that's all the time we have, but thank you so much. We'll cover these issues in the months to come. For coverage on all of these topics and more, you can visit us on militarytimes.com and defensenews.com, and you can track all of our latest headlines on all of our social media channels. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next week.